Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're cracking open the official guide for teaching English to first-year middle school students in Algeria. We're going to see how an entire country designs a language curriculum from the ground up, mixing big educational theories with the practical, everyday reality of the classroom.
Okay, let's kick things off with this key line from the guide itself because, honestly, it frames the entire challenge perfectly. We're talking about kids at a huge turning point, making that jump from primary to middle school. So the goal is way bigger than just teaching English. It's about helping them adapt and build on everything they already know. So here's our game plan. We're going to follow the guide's own logic. First, we'll look at the big picture blueprint. Then, we'll dive into the learner-centered approach, the why behind it all. After that, we'll peek inside the mind of an 11-year-old student and then see how that all translates into the anatomy of an actual lesson. And we'll finish up with the ultimate goal, building what they call global competence. All right, let's get into it. First up, the new blueprint. Now, you might think this is just some teacher's manual, but it's way more than that. The guide itself calls it a reference document. Its job is to support teachers and make sure everyone is on the same page right across the country, especially during this massive educational shift. It's the official playbook for every single first-year English teacher.
So what is this big shift all about? What's the why behind this change? Well, it's a huge move away from old-school traditional teaching. They're embracing what's officially called the competency-based approach, or CBA for short. And this one idea, it's the engine driving everything else we're about to see.
And this right here, this is the absolute core of that change. On one side, you've got the traditional approach. It's all about the teacher delivering content. But with the competency-based approach, the whole thing gets flipped on its head. The spotlight moves. It's no longer about what the teacher teaches, it's all about what the student can actually do.
To put it simply, CBA is all about practical skills. It's the difference between reading a book about how to ride a bike and actually being able to ride one. The guide is super clear. The goal isn't just knowing grammar rules. It's about demonstrating the competence to communicate in real situations. It's about performance, not just knowledge.
And these principles all work together to create a really dynamic system. It's learner-centered, so everything starts with what the student needs. It's outcome-oriented, so everyone knows the target from day one. And because it's assessment-driven, teachers can see in real time who's getting it and who needs more help, which allows for a flexible pace. It's definitely not one-size-fits-all.
Now, this is crucial. To make any of this work, the guide insists that teachers have to get inside the minds of their students. And remember, we're talking about 11-year-olds. They're right in the middle of a huge developmental roller coaster, not just in how they think, but in how they feel, too.
So here's the key psychological shift. At this age, their brains are literally rewiring. They're moving away from only thinking about concrete things, stuff they can see and touch, and they're starting to grapple with abstract ideas. They can finally ask those what-if questions, and that ability, it completely opens up a whole new world of teaching possibilities. Now, this isn't just guesswork. The curriculum is built on the shoulders of giants, specifically the famous psychologist Jean Piaget. It recognizes that this is the age when kids develop metacognition. That's just a fancy word for thinking about your own thinking. And that's a game changer, because a teacher can now guide them to reflect on how they're learning. And it doesn't stop with Piaget. It also brings in another heavyweight, Lev Vygotsky, and his super influential idea of the zone of proximal development. Sounds complicated, but the idea is pretty simple. It's that sweet spot where a task is a little too hard for a student to do alone, but they can do it with guidance from a teacher or by working with friends. Basically, learning isn't a solo sport, it's a team effort. On top of all that, the guide brings it back to a really practical point. Not everyone learns the same way, so it breaks it down into 4 key styles. You've got visual for kids who need to see it, auditory for those who need to hear it, kinesthetic for the ones who need to move and do it, and tactile for students who learn by touching. The message is clear, a great lesson needs to mix it up to engage everyone. Okay, so we've talked about the big ideas, the psychology, but how does this all actually look in a classroom? This is where the rubber meets the road, where all that theory gets baked into a practical, step-by-step recipe that teachers can follow every day. The guide calls it the sequence layout. Check this out. Every single lesson is built on this same 6-step foundation. It kicks off with get ready to get the kids hooked. Then they move into taking information in, with listen and interact and read and interpret. After that, they start producing it themselves. First, they write together, then they write alone. And the whole thing wraps up with a progress check. It's a really logical roadmap.
Let's zoom in on step 2, listen and interact, because this is where you really see the theory in action. For instance, here's a little audio snippet from the curriculum.
Jack, what do you do every day?
See, the point isn't for students to just sit there and listen passively. It's for them to listen and then immediately interact. It's a perfect practical example of Vygotsky's social learning.
And the progression in the writing phase is just brilliant. First, in Write Together, students are working in groups with the teacher's help. Then they transition to Write Alone, where they have to show what they can do by themselves. This is a classic teaching technique called scaffolding. It's like teaching someone to ride a bike with training wheels. You give them support, then you gradually take it away until they can ride all on their own.
All right, so after all these theories, learning styles, and lesson steps, what's it all for? What's the end game? What is the one thing a student should actually be able to do with their English by the end of the year? Well, the entire year is built around these three main themes. And notice, these aren't dry, abstract topics. They're super relatable, designed to get 11-year-olds talking and writing about things they actually care about, their daily habits, their school life, and their family trips. It's all about their world.
And that brings us to the final target, the big one. The guide calls the ultimate goal global competence. And what that boils down to is this. Can the student use English for real-world stuff? Can they understand, interact, and produce their own short, simple messages to describe their world and tell a basic story, both out loud and on paper? If they can do that, they've hit the goal.
So when you really pull this guide apart, you see that a modern curriculum isn't just a checklist of topics to cover. It's a map, a carefully designed map for a learning journey. And that's the key, right? A good map doesn't just show you the destination, it shows you the path and gives a reason for every single turn you take, giving purpose to the whole incredible adventure of learning a new language.